History is told in words and pictures, but the words usually appear on the printed page. Even in a closely knit organization like the Maryland State Police, history becomes statistical, and to a new recruit and veteran trooper alike, the earlier days of the force become dim and distant. This recording is an attempt to bring a small part of our history to life, in the words of some of the persons whose lives were woven into the events which have brought us where we are today.
Up until the time that this barrack opened and actually went operational in May of 1977. The history of Berlin goes through Salisbury Barrack, in that Salisbury provided all of the state police response to the lower shore, the lower three counties. At some point, they created the Snow Hill Detachment, and which really was not much more than an office in the bottom of what still is today the courthouse. That was in the early to mid 1970s. And ultimately, the need for a barrack is identified, and the Berlin Barrack was built in 1976 and went operational in May of 1977.
I was just recently shown an article with my grandfather, who was Delegate Russell O. Hickman back in the time, who was very invested in this barrack. Was quoted in some of the things that he said and how he felt about it. And I do remember him talking, about it and how proud he was of the police officers in this area and how much they helped him in his job. And he was actually driven back and forth to the General Assembly by a state trooper. I think it was Kirk Doherty back in the day actually was assigned to him. Prior to the 70s, the troopers just sort of worked out of the Berlin Police Department and Snow Hill Police Department. So if you were on the north end, you'd go to Berlin Police Department to submit a report or do a report, and if you were further south, you'd go to Snow Hill Police Department. We had partnerships with those agencies, back then. That dates back to the 1950s and 1960s. One of the stories that I didn't know about until recently is the Ash Wednesday storm.
Actually, it's like 12 servers, it looks like. And there's wires hanging down.
I need to report that my father is staying in his beach house and he's being inundated with water.
It was about 11 o'clock. Well, now I'd been on the road since 7 that morning. So I pulled in front of the police station on Dorchester Street. That's where the Ocean City Police Station was at that time. Laid down across the front seat, and in 20 minutes the water was running through the car. I stayed at the Coast Guard station overnight, and it was at Caroline Street then. The hotel there was Maryland Inn. That's why I pulled in back of Maryland Inn, and Jim Carey came shortly thereafter. And so I got my little tow cable out of the trunk of the car, lashed it on the telephone pole. Jim did not. So the next morning when we came out about 5 o'clock, Jim's car had floated down. It was down near the bridge. And people had crawled up in the attic. That's where the ocean came across. And then that's when Monahan, who was a sergeant, he brought 2 more troopers in. And we waited in. But finally got him out, and then that would have been Wednesday morning. But the Ocean City Fire Department did a wonderful job. Those guys came out. And the assistants really didn't come in until later on Wednesday. That's when they brought some more troopers in.
I was either a corporal or a sergeant at Berlin and was experimenting with a router set that I had, and I was probably working on some shadow boxes. I've done 400 to 600, somewhere around that. But working on them, I came back to look at that board and said, what am I going to do with this redwood board that's here? And the idea came and I worked it out.
Welcome to Barrack V, Berlin, the class of the Eastern Troop. And I remember coming through that back door and there was that sign, and I'll never forget it.
Chuck Martin was a staple at the Berlin Barrack.
Yep.
And of course, I worked on his campaign when he...
Chuck, he and I were sergeants together. And I went to public affairs, and that's where I made first sergeant. And lieutenant, well, long story short, when I got transferred to Berlin from Princess Anne, he was promoted to first sergeant. Chuck was like having an extra barrack commander. I mean, it was easy peasy, lemon squeezy for me with Chuck Martin there. I didn't have to worry about much at all.
Chuck was always getting into something. I mean, he was the trooper that was out there on the road finding the open doors, when, the alarms weren't going off, and he was just always finding things like that. And he was such a very thorough trooper.
Berlin Barrack also served Somerset County from 1977 until 2002 through the Princess Anne Detachment.
At that time, Smith Island, being part of Somerset County, was under our responsibility. In the barracks, they placed a Jeep over there for troopers to use to go patrol the island. And we would go over about once a month or so, and we were always under orders not to write citations because no cars over there were registered. They were pieces of junk. Transportation over there was either you had to take, the county had a World War II landing craft. That's how we got over, or you had to get Natural Resources Police to take you over. Most of the calls we were dispatched to may be an occasional theft of seafood out of a crab shanty or something like that. Nothing ever serious, just minor calls. People enjoyed us coming over there. They did.
Phone calls come in here. There's your phone number. There's where it's hitting. It's also mapping up there the whole time.
Fascinating. Today, it's just amazing. It's changed so much. Technology has just taken over the world and the barrack.
When she trained me, we still did the radio logs were handwritten. Our cards were stamped with a stamper. Everything you did was handwritten.
Obviously, the radio room is totally different than I remember it being, and the systems and all. Much more advanced and much more trooper friendly than I think it was back in the day when we didn't have all the technology, because now truly they can see where the police officers are, and that's a big thing for trooper safety.
I was assigned there in the mid-'80s, so it was a brand new barrack when I got there, and it was a gorgeous barrack, and it was truly a classy barrack. It had a number of bedrooms. I slept in those bedrooms many nights as a cadet with the Maryland State Police. I was staying with another cadet there, Don Welker, and it just felt like a family there. Every single night on night patrol, PCO Grace Cochran or PCO Nancy Birdingham, every single night would make breakfast for the troopers. In 1987, while assigned to the Berlin Barrack as a young trooper, I had a cadet who used to ride with me all the time on his own time, and that cadet would be Colonel Jerry Jones. He would ride with me on his own time many, many nights at the Berlin Barrack, and then when he entered the Maryland State Police Academy and graduated from the academy, he was assigned to the Berlin Barrack, where I was his field training trooper.
And who you get as a field trainer is the gateway to your future. And Mike has been legendary in his work, going on to interdiction, and he's certainly become a name that's known throughout the nation in that interdiction world, and that's who I got to field train with. I see Berlin Barrack as my home. I mean, that's where I started right out of high school. I went there as a cadet. I was on the old Truck Enforcement Division roving crew down there, and the first time I stepped through Berlin Barrack, I was, of course, brand new. It was a cast of characters that worked at that place, but they all worked hard. Even to this day, 35 years later, when I drive on eastbound 50 heading towards Ocean City or Berlin, when I get to Pittsville or Willards, I get this feeling I'm coming home. And I ride by Route 346 on Route 50 or Hall Road, because back in that day, there was always troopers there. And you knew that when you got to the Worcester County line on Route 50, you better slow down, because there were troopers everywhere and they were out there working hard.
Every day working as a trooper at the Berlin Barrack was a holiday. And I do mean that, in that it was just fun to come to work. And while assigned to the Berlin Barrack, Maryland State Police gave birth to the new Reach the Beach initiative.
During the summer months, our population from, say, June to perhaps Labor Day, the population just soared. So we had the responsibility of ensuring the free flow of traffic to the resort. That was huge back then.
And we had troopers from all over the state that could transfer to the Berlin Barrack for 3 months and work there during the summer months as a temporary assignment to assist the Berlin Barrack with all the traffic congestion. Back in the late 80s and early 90s, it was nothing for the troopers at the Berlin Barrack. One trooper to write 50 to 75 tickets a day manually. I personally was the first trooper on the Eastern Shore to ever be assigned a laser. Laser being an acronym for light amplification stimulated by emissions of radiation. They call it LIDAR today, but it was a laser gun back then, and I was one of only a couple troopers in the entire state to get a laser. But I would actually get up in a bucket truck, a state highway bucket truck that was parked in the woods, and they would extend the bucket out from the woods into the opening, and I'd have a clear view of traffic headed eastbound on Route 50 just west of the Berlin Barrack. And I would call out hundreds of stops a day traveling eastbound on Route 50 headed Ocean City. It was common knowledge that those headed Ocean City, for the most part, would check their brains in at the toll facility on the Annapolis side of the Bay Bridge. And as they headed eastbound towards the beach, they would commit crazy traffic infractions. I got 6 vehicles traveling together one day at 112 miles per hour. Being a trooper at the Berlin Barrack was like having a front row seat to the greatest show on earth. Every day you came to work, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. From the time I entered that county, there were times I would stay behind a drunk in Wicomico and get it stopped in Worcester. That way I could go straight to the Berlin Barrack and process my drunk. But, and there were many arrests made before I ever got to the barrack. And back then, the state police superintendent, Colonel Elmer Tippett, and he was a great superintendent in that he recognized one trooper in each troop across the state. Every year, he would recognize the highest producers of drug arrest and the highest producers of DWI arrest, which are the hallmarks of the Maryland State Police.
This job is all about who you meet and who you encounter along the way, and Berlin Barrack started it for me. I had great supervisors. L. Moses Harvey, he jumps out at me because he would hold you accountable, but he would do it in such a way that leave you with your dignity. And I've never forgotten that. And I went on to work with him at different stages in my career. Ed Lashley was there. Ed Lashley was a sergeant when I came out, and Carol Overholt, Chuck Martin, just to name but a few. But these guys have spent a lot of time in Worcester County, believed in it, what they were doing to impact the county, and are still there. Lieutenant Starner, he's been there 15 years as the barrack commander now. I mean, it's unheard of in the department, but the impact he's had on that community down there, our partners with Ocean City, Berlin PD, Pocomoke, Snow Hill, the Sheriff's Office, I can go on and talk about those agencies, but we've been a mainstay, and there's not a time that I can go in that county and not say, hey, State Police is here with us, they're a great partner.
I do take pride in the relationships that we have in this county. I think I'm fortunate to work in Worcester County, a rural area. I don't know if there's any science behind that, but it's a community that absolutely supports law enforcement, and I mean the whole community. So not just our allied partners. We really do just have so many relationships, whether it's the call from Ocean City for a hurricane or a special event, or whether it's just one of our troopers answering the call from a citizen here. We've got so many good people that have worked for me here over the years that I truly have enjoyed and embraced this position as the commander, and enjoyed all those relationships so much.
We rely on people coming to Ocean City, and the Maryland State Police help keep the roadways safe all the way from the Bay Bridge to Ocean City. They've always been there when we've had issues, when we've had major problems, when we needed additional agencies here, really in a very quick period of time, to handle something that might have occurred on the boardwalk or other areas of town.
There are plenty of car events that have come and gone over the years, cruise in Ocean City in the summer, in the spring, Bike Week, many what I call motor events. The one that stands out most of all is this We refer to it as the unsanctioned pop-up rally. That is an event that started as a car event that grew into something else, something much worse.
It got to the point where we actually sent postcards to our residents and to our 26,000 non-resident property owners suggesting they not come to Ocean City that weekend.
Probably some of the most significant deployments of Maryland State Police resources really ever. More than 100 troopers a day through some of those times.
It was a major problem for public safety for all of our personnel. We were very, very fortunate over the course of that 5-year period, working with our allied partners and the state, and in particular Maryland State Police.
We had laws passed that were unique to Worcester County just to address that event, and the state police supported that legislation that gave us some additional enforcement tools.
Our hands were tied unless we took drastic action. The Maryland State Police were right by our side the whole time. They started to address this as soon as people came over the Bay Bridge all along Route 50. They addressed it in Berlin, and they became our partners in Ocean City.
As of 2022, we were successful in sort of restoring that town to its residents and visitors. I've had the incredible opportunity to be part of the designing and the planning for the new Berlin Barrack. And we'll be sort of like Cumberland with a really large lab, and so it's going to be a super impressive building. Cumberland has one brick from the old barrack for every year of service that barrack was in place, which, if I'm not mistaken, was 62 years. Our idea will be to take the bricks from the old barrack and we're going to inlay that into the concrete in the front of the barrack and make a V.
When you come east, you see that barrack, and it's going to be cool to see a brand new building there. So I'm very proud to see that. Hopefully I'll be welcome as a visitor, as a retiree. I can come down there and check it out when it's all done.
I never realized it until I got a lot older, just how much the state police impacted my life. Still, the friendships I made, the older troopers instilled a lot of what I call the old ways inside of me, and I will always bleed green and black.
My last day on the job, when I retired as a lieutenant colonel in 2015, I went and worked a road in Berlin. And I had no idea that 3 months later I'd get a call and go to the Maryland Transportation Authority Police as their chief for 4 years, 2 or 3 months, and then get a call from the governor and want me to come back and finish this out. So,
Berlin Barrack, I think it catapulted me to understand and the pace of what I was doing. I still have friends and relationships that endure to this day. The investigative group that was assigned to Berlin Barrack at the time were probably some of the best investigators in our state's history.
I have a lot of great memories of the Berlin Barrack, but there are a lot of memories that certainly formed me into the trooper that I became, I think, for the Maryland State Police, because they were my formative years, without a doubt. I was molded into the trooper I became, and I'm very proud to have served as a Maryland State Trooper at the Berlin Barrack V, what I consider today to still be the class of the Eastern Troop, no doubt.
In July of 1985, a new class came out of the academy, and in that class there were actually several that came to Berlin, but one that I did not know at the time would eventually become my husband. We've been married for 36 years now, and it's been a wonderful journey. I tell people that I used to tell him where to go, and I still tell him where to go. So